Well, welcome to 2017 for movies. Yeah, it's been a while since I've uploaded a movie review. We're currently in the 4th week of January, so the 4th week of 2017, and this is my first movie review for that year. And I'm sorry I haven't uploaded any movie reviews till now, but I've been working the third shift lately, so I'm kind of nocturnal at this point, at least until February 12th. Then I was also sick for a while, and I just didn't have a lot of time to actually film a movie review. But I have seen 10 movies from 2017 so far, or at least movies I consider 2017 films because of their wide release date. So let's try to hurry up and get to it before I get far behind already in the first month of 2017. Now technically the first movie I saw in 2017 is La La Land, but that is a movie with several different release dates. I looked it up online to see when was the first wide release, because apparently it had 3 wide release dates, and the first wide release was in Christmas of 2016. So La La Land, 2016 movie. But from my standards of movie release dates, I consider Hidden Figures my first official 2017 film, because it had a limited release date in December 25th, but it had a wide release in the first week of January. And for me, wide release trumps limited release. Now, since this is the 4th week of January, most likely you've already seen it if you want to see it, but here are my thoughts on what the movie's about. Essentially, Hidden Figures is the untold story of 3 women, 3 black women, working for NASA that had a major impact in the space race, in 3 different aspects of it. This is set in the 1960s, there is segregation, and NASA was no different during this time period. But things are a little shaken up when they need the brightest minds in order to really send a person into space before the Russians. But one of our 3 main women, Catherine, played by Taraji P. Henson? Hopefully I pronounced that right. I know her from plenty of other things. I just never really heard her name yet. She has to figure out the math equation. She has to find and make up the math equation that will help bring our man into space and back down to Earth. And there's a lot of different other stories jumbled in, and it's pretty much about 3 or 5 stories in one, really. But essentially that's what Hidden Figures is. Now, I saw Hidden Figures the 2nd week of January, even though it came out the 1st week, but that's when I saw La La Land. Then I saw Saturday on the 2nd week of January, Hidden Figures with my sister. And I have to say, the theater, even on its 2nd week, was packed. A lot of people wanted to see Hidden Figures. And to be quite honest, I found it really entertaining. First off, the acting, really great cast, and really great acting overall. All 3 of the main women are absolutely phenomenal, with great chemistry. You can definitely tell that these characters are meant to be friends. Like, they feel believable, they feel genuine. Like I said before, we have Taraji P. Henson playing as Catherine, our main girl. She is sent in to do the math and solve the equations, and sort of goes in there as a computer at first because they don't have computers right now. They're working to get computers in NASA, and for now they have people actually computing and double checking all the equations. And so she's essentially brought in there at first, but ultimately is the one that eventually starts solving all the real problems that they have. Octavia Spencer is great, and she's the supervisor of the colored computers, because that's their title job, they're computers. Unfortunately, even though she is doing the work of a supervisor, putting in the hours and everything, she's not technically the supervisor because there's no job opening for supervisors of the colored computer section. And so she has a story of not only trying to become the supervisor of her section, but also she sees where things are heading, and she adjusts and helps her staff adjust to it because of the new computers coming in. I won't spoil too much if you haven't seen it yet and still want to see it. And recently I saw Janelle Monáe in Moonlight, and she's back again, and this time in Hidden Figures as the other girl, and she's becoming an engineer, and she's trying to get the classes and trying to get the education, even though it is an all-white school. Or maybe not an all-white, maybe just a segregated school. And so, of course, she has her little story as well. And like I said, it's a bunch of different stories within this movie, all working together for the same goal. But of course, these three actresses weren't the only great things about this movie. Everyone's acting in this movie was really great. You got Kevin Costner as the boss, and he's pretty amazing as well. Mahershala Ali, who was in Moonlight as well, is in this one again, and he is the love interest, the person who falls in love with our main girl, Catherine. Both of them were really sweet together. I love that romance in this movie. And you also have Kirsten Dunst and Jim Parsons, also really great in this movie as well. Everyone did a really great job. So much so that I honestly can't decide who did the best out of all of these people. And because I am a fan of science, and especially the history of space, exploration, and all that kind of stuff, honestly, I was very invested in this movie, not only because of the science, but because it's an untold story of people important to the space race that we just never heard about. But the space race wasn't the only part of the story that I was interested in. There's a bunch of side stories, bunch of personal development for these characters and their own stories that all interweaved in this movie, and I found them all fascinating. Now, when it comes to movies about racism or segregation, this is one of the more light-hearted films. This is one of the ones that's a little bit safe and a little bit more family-friendly. Some could even argue that it's more of a history class type of movie that you show in high schools. But honestly, that actually helped the movie. Now, I'm not a huge fan of a lot of light-hearted films, ones that are overly sappy or just too feel-good of a movie. You know, there's an audience for movies that are feel-good movies, inspirational movies, movies that are cheesy. It's fair. There's a lot of people that love that kind of stuff and only love that kind of stuff. I'm not a huge fan of those types of movies, especially if they go overboard with the cheesiness or the hokiness or the overbearingly sentimental. Despite this movie being very lighthearted and going in a little bit more of that direction, honestly, it never went overboard for me, and I found myself entertained. This is the kind of hokiness, this is the kind of lighthearted, inspirational movie where it actually works and doesn't feel overly so. Many times I did find myself laughing and just feeling like this is a very light-hearted movie, but at the same time, underneath it all, there is still a dramatic depth to it, and there is still importance to it. And while there is times where it is a little bit preachy when it comes to civil rights or that time and that era, which makes total sense for this type of movie. And while some of the messages could be very blatant, there is some really great subtlety within the film that is really dramatic. Like with our main character having to go to this place where it's just all white men and that whole segregation era, there is some subtlety to the things that she has to overcome, the looks that she gets, a little bit of subtlety to the racism and the segregation of that time period with whenever she's in that room. And it progressively gets better as the movie goes along. They warm up to her and they become more of a team, as you'd expect in this type of movie. But it never gets to a point where it's like a bunch of people are just grateful to have her and they all see her as one person and they all congratulate her. It's very little moments, very human moments. And of course, with a movie about segregation, of course you're going to have some of the racist characters in this film, because you got to have racist characters within a film about civil rights. And the two actors that play those characters in this film is Kirsten Dunst and Jim Parsons. Now, out of those two, Kirsten Dunst was the only one that really felt like a really cold-hearted, bitchy character. Like, she plays it very, very well.
No. They're not assigning a permanent supervisor for the colored group.
May I ask why?
I don't know why. I didn't ask why.
We need a supervisor, ma'am. We haven't had one since Miss Jansen got sick. It's been almost a year.
Things are working just fine as is.
I'm doing the work of a supervisor.
Well, that's NASA for you. Fast with rocket ships, slow with advancement. Get those trajectory calcs worked out. We need them for the Redstone test.
Jim Parsons' character is kind of a smart aleck and honestly probably more prideful than anything. And so his sort of disdain for this new coming person is more out of pride, it seems, rather than straight up racism.
Mr. Harrison wants you to confirm launch and landing for the Redstone rocket test.
I cannot work on what I cannot see, Mr. Stafford. It's illegible.
Those numbers have already been confirmed by 2 engineers in this department and myself. This is more or less a dummy check.
But maybe that's just my interpretation of it. Instead, this movie doesn't go overly racist. This movie doesn't have people be blatantly crazy and just screaming at people. This is more along the lines of racism in a segregated culture. More of the characters in this movie is just pretty much going by the rules, going by what society says about segregation, and doesn't see it as racist.
You know, Dorothy, despite what you may think, I have nothing against y'all.
I know. I know you probably believe that.
At least the white characters in this film, of course. But then there are some people that do see it as wrong and totally treat everyone like they're just normal human beings. But again, I love the subtlety within this movie because even though it does become blatant, even though it might have some preachiness to it, even though it is a lighthearted film that might overly explain a lot of things, there is subtlety deep within it. There are visual hints and things that you're just, wow, that actually works dramatically despite it being lighthearted as well. Not a lot of lighthearted movies dealing with this sort of thing tend to be as dramatic and successful as Hidden Figures, so I gotta hand it to them for sure. There is a lot of stories and a lot of moving parts within this movie, but I feel that everything gets its equal share. Every subplot feels like it's fully developed and adds to the plot of the film. The only thing I wish there was a little bit more of was Catherine's family life. Because even though it does sort of detour away from the NASA stuff, I found her personal life interesting, more interesting than the other two characters. Even though I do like Janelle Monáe's personal life as well with her husband and her kids, but less so than Catherine's. Maybe it's because I found her and Mahershala Ali's character very cute together and they had great chemistry. I want to see more scenes with both of them together because they did a fine job together. So a little bit of the negative is I wish there was a little bit more of that, but we still get enough to see the really cute relationship blossom. I think the only few negatives I have with this film is, for one, the plot is very by the numbers when it comes to inspirational films, when it comes to historical biopics, when it comes to segregation stories. It is very by the numbers and you can predict everything that's going to happen. Now granted, I feel this movie does it a lot better than some other by the numbers mediocre movies of that type. This movie does go above and beyond the average. But for any of you that feels like by the numbers is too generic for you, despite how well by the numbers is done within the movie, then you might not find Hidden Figures all that great. You might think it's okay. And another little negative about the film is that even though I do praise its lightheartedness because it still has that dramatic impact within the film, sometimes the lighthearted tone could really sabotage the film at times. Because when it does go serious and dramatic, when it does tell of certain events that also happened in the 1960s, around the time the timeline of this film is taking place, when it does some really serious moments, sometimes it can be jarring and just feel out of place in this movie. It almost feels like it's obligated that, hey, a big event happened during this time when it comes to civil rights, we gotta have that in there. And then there's another thing that I can't help but feel a little mixed about when it comes to the lightheartedness turned dramatic. You see, throughout the movie, Catherine doesn't have any colored bathrooms within the building she has to work at. And so she has to go about a half a mile to go back to the building where she came from just to use the restroom. And during those sequences when she's running across the campus to get to the colored bathrooms, well, it is played off in a lighthearted tone. It's actually played off comedically throughout these moments. And so you're kind of laughing a little bit, while at the same time still kind of, wow, I can't believe she has to do this. And so I bet a bunch of people probably don't even think that and might be laughing through these scenes because it is played off like a comedy. But then it takes a turn for the serious when there's a dramatic moment because of it, because she has to run in the rain, run back, and Kevin Costner's questioning her, where does she go for 45 minutes during the day? She's like, I have to go to the bathroom. He's like, what are you doing in the bathroom for 45 minutes? And she has this breakdown where she explains that she has to run a half a mile just to use the restroom. And she explodes and has her big dramatic yelling moment in this film.
What do you mean there's no bathroom for you here?
There is no bathroom. There are no colored bathrooms in this building or any building outside the West Campus, which is half a mile away. Did you know that? I have to walk to Timbuktu just to relieve myself. And I can't use one of the handy bikes. Picture that, Mr. Harrison. My uniform, skirt below my knees, my heels, and a simple string of pearls. Well, I don't own pearls. Lord knows you don't pay colors enough to afford pearls. And I work like a dog, day and night, living off of coffee from a pot none of you want to touch. So, excuse me if I have to go to the restroom a few times a day.
And so that's played off seriously. It's almost like, hey, you know that thing that you thought was funny that we played off as a comedy for most of the film? Yeah, shame on you for laughing. That's what it kind of feels like. Maybe it's meant to feel like that, I don't know. But it felt really jarring in this movie because of how the scenes were played out before this crazy breakdown. And there isn't enough build-up, I feel, for the character to break down during this moment. But that's just a little thing. Honestly, I still really enjoyed Hidden Figures, and I'm going to give Hidden Figures 4 stars. So did you see Hidden Figures? What'd you think about it? Go ahead and comment below. And if you like this video and you want to see more, please subscribe and check out my other movie reviews. I've got ones of 2015, 2016, and hopefully I'll have more for 2017, because got 9 more to go. Currently. As always, this is Bruce Gifford, and this was Just My Opinion.